On the night Pastor Walter crossed my threshold, the storm outside wasn't the only thing breaking. A secret letter waited beneath my floorboards. My mother's voicemail echoed with a warning. And when Walter's eyes met mine, I realized I'd invited more than prayer into my house. That choice changed everything. The storm reached my house first, dragging the river smell up the hill and rattling the porch like an old confession booth. I was fitting a stubborn bookcase against the living room wall when the knock came. 3 careful taps that sounded more like a question than a demand. My phone, face down on the table, still had my mother's missed call glowing like a small moon. I did not play her voicemail yet. Instead, I opened the door and let the storm carry in Pastor Walter. He stood soaking in the threshold, collar bright against the dark, one hand holding a paper-wrapped bouquet of white lilies, the other lifting an apology. "Romeo," he said, voice low and warm, as if the syllables might spook the weather. I asked permission to come earlier, but I should have asked permission to bring the sky. "It is only rain," I said, and stepped aside. The lilies brushed my sleeve as he passed. Their sweetness tugged at something older than this house, something I did not have words for. He toed off his shoes with the solemnity of a man stepping onto holy ground and scanned the room with eyes like overcast glass. I had lived here 2 weeks, just long enough to learn which floorboards complained and which kept secrets. This afternoon, one of them surrendered a boxy envelope, brittle and mouse-bitten, with my name written in a hand that was not mine. It lay now under a stack of unpaid bills on the mantel waiting. Pastor Walter did not look at it. He looked at me, the way a map looks at a traveler who refuses to ask for directions. "How are you settling in?" he asked, droplets still holding to his hair. "Like a cat in a new kingdom," I said. We smiled at the same time, then looked away as if we had rehearsed how to keep a room from noticing. He set the lilies in a mason jar, the stems knocking glass like wind chimes. "It is tradition," he said, "to bring lilies for a blessing. Purity in the new corners, bright sleepers to chase bad dreams." "Do lilies chase or invite?" I asked. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. "They do both," he said. And then he moved through the room with a deliberate gentleness, touching the bookcase, the cracked window, the photograph of my mother in her red dress. I felt my ribs tighten when his fingers hovered near the frame. The missed call flashed again in my head, her name bright as a siren. "You did not sound like you believed in blessings on the phone," he said, almost teasing. "I expected a prayer and a quick exit," I said. "And instead?" he asked. And instead I made. He followed me into the kitchen, where the kettle breathed steam like a patient animal. Outside, thunder rolled its shoulders. The rain settled in as if for a long story. "Do you mind," I asked, "if we skip the ritual and just talk?" "I can bless a house with words and with listening," he said. We sat at the small table, our knees almost touching. In the corner, the lilies drank their jar into a bright silence. He wrapped his hands around his cup as if it were a hearth. "I have not been to church in a while," I said, and watched the steam try to disappear. "That is allowed," he said, voice soft. "The way you talk to a door that has stuck from not being used." My throat thinned. I left because I wanted to love without feeling like God had slipped a meter around my heart. "And the man you loved?" he asked. "He went where the water was easier." I did not say I meant courage. The lights went out, smooth as if someone had dimmed the room to make a point. We froze, then laughed, 2 small sounds in a big dark. I found the candles by memory and matchlight. He cupped the flame while I touched wick to wick. In that brief flare, his face looked different, less pastor and more man, the shadow of a dimple catching me like a hook. A drop of rain fell from his hair to his jaw. I watched it find a path it liked. He cleared his throat, as if he had heard my thoughts. "I should say the blessing," he said. "Please," I said, though what I meant was stay. He stood and moved slowly, candle in one hand, the other open to the air, as if lifting something invisible. "May this home keep your courage," he said, and your laughter, and even the parts of you that are not ready to come out yet. His words found that thin place under my ribs where all my private Saturdays live. I said amen because there was nothing else to say. Thunder agreed. Then my phone buzzed, the sound small and desperate in the candlelight. My mother's voicemail, recorded an hour earlier, slid into the room. "Romeo," she said, "please do not be alone with that pastor tonight." Her voice was tight, careful, as if wrapped in old newsprint. "I cannot explain yet," she said. "Not on this message. Just keep the door open and do not let him take anything, even a small box. Call me when he leaves." The message ended with the breath of someone who wanted to say 3 more sentences and could not find a staircase. I felt Walter watching me, not intruding, only present, the way mountains are present. "If I need to go," he said, "I can come back another time." "No," I said too quickly, and then softer. "No, please. It is probably her worry rehearsing its favorite show." "And the box?" he asked. "Not a box, exactly," I said, and the word exactly did not feel honest. "It is a letter." "May I see it?" he asked quietly. "Please." He asked to see the letter, and the storm held its breath. My mother's warning gnawed my ribs. "Keep the door open. Don't let him take anything." I propped the door, lit another candle, watched him remove his collar. Between us, an old envelope, waited to change our names forever. I slid a paperback under the threshold to wedge it wide, letting the night lean its wet cheek against my hallway. The door sighed, obedient to my mother's voice even while she was miles away and only as real as a voicemail in a dark room. Walter glanced at the door, then at me. "If that eases your mother's heart, we can keep it like that," he said. He tugged, his collar loose, and set it on the table by the lilies. Without it, he looked impossibly ordinary. Tired eyes, damp hair, and uneven curls, a shy crease at the mouth that didn't know whether to be a smile or a secret. "I won't take anything from you without your yes, Romeo," he said. His voice had lost the pulpit's railing. It planked itself across my worry like a bridge I might dare step on. I lifted the boxy envelope from beneath the stack of bills. The paper felt like bark, like something that remembered rain. My name. On it, Romeo, looked the way a stranger might say it, careful and undecided. He sat but didn't reach. The candle shaded his cheekbone gold. The lilies whispered their sugar. I slid a thumb under the stiff flap. The tearing was small thunder. A single page, folded twice. On its crease, a smudge like a fingerprint at the end of a long day. I read it without passing it over, felt his gaze on the place where my voice would be if I'd given it sound. The letter wore the plainness of someone who has carried something heavy for too long and decides to put it down with both hands. "Romeo, if you are reading this, the house has outlived me as we both expected it would." I left and returned to these rooms more times than any calendar permits, but the floorboards always remembered my sorrow and my dancing. There is a small tin box under the hearthboard closest to the window. In it are a ring and a key and a photograph. The ring is for you if you ever find a hand you cannot stop thinking about when it rains. The key opens a deposit box at River & Sons. The number you'll find wrapped around it on a string. What's in that box belongs to your mother, and to you, not to any deacon or ledger. I tried to say that out loud and failed. This is the coward's truth I could only leave in wood. If men from the church come asking to remove family things for heritage, remember the church is only as honest as the people in it. Some of them are good, some of them are afraid, and fear makes thieves without realizing. If you love a man, do not let anyone measure you for a smaller life than fits. The sky does not scold the river for the way it runs. Forgive an old man his unfinished prayers. Elias Morrow Elias. My mother's father. I had his jaw and his impossible loyalty to lost causes, she liked to say when she wasn't angry. I'm being my... Read it again and again, the words sinking like warm stones. Walter spoke my name softly. "Can I see?" I passed him the letter. He held it like a chalice, but his eyes moved like a schoolteacher reading a test he already knew the answers to, and wishing he didn't. He winced at the line about deacons as if he'd stepped on a nail that didn't belong to him. Your mother's. Call, he said carefully. The box. She knew? She knows 100 things and tells 20, I said. Rain crept across the threshold, a shy tide over the welcome mat. Somewhere in the house, a pipe clicked awake. He set the letter down and looked toward the hearth. You said a board gave up the envelope. Elias sounds like a planner. If he says there's a box, there is a box. We knelt on the rug, two men obedient to a ghost. I tapped the boards, listening for that hollower knock, the tongue of the floor. The first secret had been under the third plank from the right. I slid my fingertips along the seam of the fourth. There, a whisper of give. We worked together, the small work that draws strangers closer. He braced the plank, I levered the screwdriver blade. The candle flame leaned in to eavesdrop. The board lifted and the house exhaled. Beneath, dust and a lid glinted, tinning the dark. The box was the sort that once held candy or buttons, painted with a child on a sled. The tin was scabbed with rust. When I shook it, there was a careful rattle, the sound of secrets declining to panic. I opened it. The smell, old paper, old sweetness, rose up. Inside lay a length of string with a little card, Arzenson's 312. A key on the string, small and assertive. A slim gold ring bound with the string too, warm despite everything. And a photograph wrapped in wax paper. I peeled it open. Two men stood in front of the church lake, trousers rolled, water bruising the ankles of their smiles. One of them was Elias, younger than the name made him, grin crooked, hair older than I'd expect. The other man I did not know. They leaned into each other the way the wind leans into grass, as if they had not yet learned the world's rules, and were happier for it. Walter stared at the picture a long time. That's Thomas Wynne, he said eventually. The name shivered the room. He was a deacon, then later he sat on the board that... He stopped. He closed his mouth around silence as if it would help. The board that took our orchard, I supplied. My mother's. Voice in summer clipped as scissors. They called it a tithe after the fact. He nodded once, an apology to history. I did not come to remove anything, he said. The elders asked me to check on historical materials. Yes, they have their reasons, and not all of them are selfish. But I came because you're back, because I remembered the boy who used to sit on the front steps after service and make origami from bulletins while pretending not to listen to the music. Because... He held there, on the edge of a sentence that might be a life. Because, I whispered, daring him. The ring winked in my palm. Because I wondered if anyone in this town ever told you don't have to pick between being loved and being honest, he said, voice low, as if the rain could carry his words down the hill to a jury I hadn't chosen. He looked at me like someone looking at the last star before morning makes it shy. The storm scratched at the open door. A draft pushed a lily petal to the floor. It lay there like a small white boat that had given up the shore. I slid the ring thread from the key and set both on the table. My hands trembled with a kind of precise fear. This is what it feels like when a story turns and asks you what kind of person you are. I dialed my mother, thumb clumsy with candle wax and nerves, voicemail. She had either turned her phone off or was holding it in her lap and refusing to answer. I heard my voice say, Mom, I found something. I found a letter. There is a box. I am okay. Walter, is here. Please call me. I hung up and looked at him. He sat now without his collar, without his practiced distance, just a man in a storm with me and my grandfather's truth on the table between us. The urge to step into him was a tide. On my tongue rose the taste of every withheld thing. I moved toward the lilies, toward him, toward a choice. He rose, meeting me halfway. For a heartbeat, 2, 3, our breath stitched the space into something I could wear. He reached out and touched my hand, his fingers warm where my skin had learned to be winter. The ring lay between us, a small, circular dare. I don't know how to do this without harming someone, he said, earnest in a way that made my chest ache. The church expects one thing. Your mother expects another. You expect... He trailed off. his thumb resting at the soft break of my wrist. "I expect this to matter," I said, "and I expect you to tell me what you want when you're not wearing that collar." He inhaled, and the sound was almost a prayer. "I want to stop being afraid of the truest things," he said. "I want to keep your grandfather's box here, where it belongs. I want to help you unlock whatever that key opens. I want—" His mouth stopped being a catalog. He leaned closer, the rain adding its own drum roll on the stoop. We didn't kiss. Not then. A first kiss deserved fewer witnesses than a storm with its 1,000 eyes. Instead, we rested our foreheads together like we had invented a new shape of shelter. The moment held, and then the world remembered to inconvenience us. Headlights slashed across the walls, white and merciless. Tires drowned a puddle outside. Through the open door, voices approached, folded and unfolded by the rain. "Pastor? Walter? You in there?" The shout was rough with concern and something sterner. Deacon Miller, I thought, though I hadn't heard him enough to be sure. A second voice, Sister Colleen maybe, the shape of her words softened by a kind of righteousness that wore perfume. Walter stepped back, the space between us cooling, but his face didn't close the way I feared it might. He slipped his collar into his pocket instead of his neck, and he took my hand in plain sight. "Leave the door open," my mother had said. So I did. And the storm delivered our next confession to the porch, wearing church shoes and rain. Rain carried the congregation to my porch, questions, lantern-bright eyes, and the old habit of taking what isn't offered. Walter's hand didn't flinch in mine. Between us, a ring and a key. We had to choose, surrender history, or unlock it. The night wanted witnesses. Truth wanted a door open. Deacon Miller appeared first, hat dripping a small lake onto my mat, spectacles fogged with the kind of certainty that never bothers to wipe itself clear. Sister Colleen hovered behind him, the smell of lilac and wet wool riding the storm into my living room. "Evening, Pastor," Miller said, voice pitched to carry over wind and conscience. "We saw your car outside and the church lights knocked out. Thought we'd check on you. And Brother Morrow, welcome back home." His gaze found our hands. I felt Walter's fingers tighten, not possessive, not apologizing, only present. "Sister." Colleen watched the ring on the table as if it were the last cookie on a plate at a potluck, and she wasn't sure whether it was polite to want it. "We're well," Walter said. "We were just—" He glanced at the lilies, the candlelight, the tin box, the letter, blessing the house. Miller's eyes ticked to the collar in Walter's pocket, then to the wedge holding the door open. He said, which in deacon language means much more. Sister Colleen offered a smile so spare it could have been folded up and put in a hymnal. "We do have business, Brother Morrow," she said, words carefully ironed. "The board has a mandate to collect historical materials for the centennial display. Old photographs, letters, things with heritage. There were rumors that Elias kept church papers here when the office was being painted. Best to keep them safe at the church. Best for whom? I asked. The storm peered in past their shoulders like a gossip who forgot her umbrella. Miller cleared his throat. "For history, son. For context. You know how things get twisted over time." I lifted the letter. Elias Morrow's handwriting was moonlit even in candlelight, steady and stubborn. He gave me a way to be brave when I wanted a way out. I read aloud, voice grainy but audible. "If men from the church come asking to remove family things for heritage, remember the church is only as honest as the people in it. Some of them are good, some of them are afraid, and fear makes thieves." Without realizing, Colleen flinched as if a draft had found the seam of her coat. "Nobody here is a thief," she said softly, which sounded like someone who has haunted the border of such a word and hated it. Walter spoke then, the pastor and the man braided in his voice. "Nothing leaves this house tonight. Not by my hand. I came to bless Romeo's home, not to inventory it for a glass case. If the board wants to discuss what belongs in the church, we can do that, after we know what belongs to the Morrow family." Miller's jaw worked, then reset. You put me in a difficult spot, Pastor. Truth does that, Walter said. So does love. He didn't look at me when he said it, which somehow made it truer. A car door slammed outside, a close, confident sound. The small procession of rain parted to, admit my mother, fierce as a headline, umbrella bent against the wind. She stepped in, eyes collecting details faster than the room could hide them. The open box, the picture, Walter's collar missing, our hands stitched together. I told you to keep the door open, she said to me, not smiling. You listened. Good. Miller tried the genial tone he saved for bake sales. Now, Ruth. He stopped, remembering that using a mother's name without invitation is just asking to be corrected. Ms. Morrow, we came to help. You came to help yourself to my father's life, she said, setting the umbrella so it wouldn't drip on the rug. If you want history, I'll give you history. Thomas Wynne stood in this house and asked my father to trust him. Then he sat on your board and voted to take our orchard after Dad got sick. You call it context. We called it winter. Colleen's mouth made the shape of O, though no sound came out. Her gaze landed on the photograph. She recognized Thomas, too. I saw the recognition travel through her, a little quake. There's a deposit box key, my mother continued, flicking her eyes to me for permission. I nodded. My father put things there so no one would fish them out of his floorboards while pretending they knew better what belonged to him. Tomorrow morning, we're going to River & Sons to see what he thought we'd need. Right now, you're going to go home and remember that not everything the church wants is good for the church. Miller stared at my mother in that way men do when the math on the board isn't what they expected. The rain made punctuation of the pause. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and unsatisfied. We'll talk Sunday, Pastor, he said to Walter, which was both a promise and a warning. Sister Colleen touched the doorframe, a ritual of grace I did not expect. I'm sorry for the pain, she whispered to no one specifically. Then they were gone, taking the old habit of taking with them. Silence tried on the house. The storm, deprived of its audience, wandered down the hill. My mother's shoulders dropped. She looked older and also more herself. She took me in her arms, held me until my breath remembered how. Then she stepped back and nodded at Walter. I was wrong in the message, she said. I let history drive the car. Pastor, Walter, thank you for standing beside my son. If you hurt him, I will make a second storm personally, but for now, thank you. Walter smiled like a man who had survived a test he hadn't studied for. I'd like to earn that thank you again tomorrow, he said. At the bank, if you'll have me. We will, my mother said, and there was peace in that we that felt like a new roof. We slept badly and all in the same house. My mother in her old room, Walter on the couch that complained with every shift, me not sleeping so much as rehearsing courage. At 4 a.m. the power returned, sheepish and bright. At 7 we were eating dry toast and coffee thick as late-night confession. By 8 we were parked at River & Sons, where the floor smelled like lemon and old money, and a clerk with a bun, so tight it could have held secrets, knotted us into a vault with walls like a hymn's last note. Box 312 yielded with a dignified snick. Inside, a stack of papers tied with twine too neatly to be anything but my grandfather, a long envelope addressed to Ruth Morrow in a handwriting that had learned to be brave late, a packet of certificates that made the clerk's eyebrows climb, savings, bonds matured past the point where numbers look like fiction, and a letter folded on itself like someone who had spent years bending around the wrong thing. My mother opened the envelope with her name, hands steady. A deed slid out, orchard parcel, 78 acres, signed in a hurried scrawl by Thomas Wynne, dated 2 weeks before the board called the taking a tithe. A notarized affidavit from Elias, stating that Thomas had returned the deed privately, ashamed and afraid to face the board. 2 witness signatures, a bank clerk and a nurse from the next town. My mother pressed her lips together so hard I thought a shout might be trapped there forever. The other letter I unfolded. It began, Elias. To carry my apology, you'd need a mountain. I only have this paper. It was from Thomas. He confessed to fear and to love in the same paragraph, and it bruised me to think of 2 men standing by a lake, trousers rolled, believing the world might allow them to keep both. He returned the deed and enclosed photocopies of ledgers showing how the board had salted the language to taste. He ended with, "Keep the ring if you can forgive me. If you can't, throw it in the lake and know I went in after it a long time ago." We read in a respectful quiet that included the clerk even though she pretended otherwise. My mother tucked the deed into her coat like a bird under a wing. Walter touched the affidavit, traced the notary seal with his thumb. "We can take this to the board," he said. "We can take this to the county. And if the board fails the truth, I fail the board." He stood there in his neat shirt and his resolve, a man unfastening himself from an institution without tearing it if he could help it. I loved him then, quick as a thunderclap, deep as the river that ran truer than any road. The knowledge didn't scare me. It steadied me, like a hand at the center of my back when I was learning to skate. Outside, the day had the look of forgiveness, after rain. We drove to the orchard, what would soon again be our orchard, because time had lengthened for all the wrong projects and we meant to shorten it for the right one. The trees had gone to rust and whisper, unpruned, still beautiful the way neglected things are when they remember what they were planted for. My mother walked ahead of us, touching trunks like cheekbones, counting what was lost and what was stubbornly alive. We stopped at the edge of the oldest row. The wind combed the leaves into silver. Labor crews had once laughed here, and children had stolen apples without shame because that's what a good orchard expects. Walter stood beside me, so close I could feel the weather of him. The ring warmed. In my pocket, the metal holding the temperature of decision. I threaded it onto the lace of my grandfather's string, knotted it like a small vow, and slipped it over my head. It rested against my sternum, a circle claiming no one and promising everything. I turned to him. The orchard held its breath the way my house had when he knocked. "Can I began. "Because there are words that are just you being brave enough to step into your own life," he answered by stepping closer, not to save me the sentence, but to finish it with me. His hand cupped my jaw, small calluses telling me he built things I could stand on. He kissed me like you close a door against a storm and open a window to let the good air in. It wasn't fireworks. It was a fuse lit for a long, useful light. When we parted, the day returned. A truck rumbled on the road below. Birds found their syllables again. My mother turned and saw us, and, to her eternal credit, she smiled like a person remembering water after drought. We took the papers to the county clerk that afternoon. The law collected them without drama, just stamps and signatures that made their own kind of music. We planned our Sunday. My mother pacing the boardroom with her deed like a sermon, Walter speaking more as a man than a pastor, and if the choice insisted, then choosing. That night, back in my living room, the lilies had opened another pair, of white mouths to sing whatever lilies sing. The door, unwedged now, stood closed, not out of fear, but because we had decided what belonged inside. Walter sat with his collar on the table again, not because he was ashamed of it, but because love and truth are easier to hold when your hands are your own. What happened when my pastor visited my house? The weather changed. A letter found its voice. A ring learned my pulse. And a door left open long enough became not a risk but a welcome. The place where a man walked in, and the life I had been afraid to claim walked toward me and did not stop.